So if you'd like to have find seats, please. Good evening, everyone. My name is Marlene Blatterberry, and I'm part of the, uh, can't even think of it, Civil West Group. And we are having a FireHall chat tonight. Now, Civil West is probably a new organization to some of you, but we've actually been existent here in West Fargo for 2 years. And what we do is we try to promote governance in West Fargo. We try to let people know what is going on regarding local government and other activities in West Fargo. So would you, those of you who are on the Civil West group, please raise your hand so they know who you are? Okay, and then Joan is out in the hall. Okay, thank you for registering this evening. Because you registered, you are eligible to receive our newsletter. Wow, isn't that exciting, huh? And in addition to that, you see some white sheets on the tables there. When we're done with the evening, we'd like you to give us your thoughts on tonight's presentation and for future presentations too. This is number 20 of the chats that we have supported now in West Fargo, so we want to keep going with them. Now, those of you who raised your hand, we are all volunteers with this group. And we're looking for additional volunteers. Anybody who might be interested in working with us and helping us, why, please let me know or one of the other people know. Now, just to let you know too, we have no funds. Basically, we operate very economically. We have been fortunate enough, though, to receive some donations from some organizations. One of them is the League of Women Voters, the WFACP, which is the seniors group in West Fargo, the AARP of North Dakota, Marvin Windows, and Scott Brand, attorney. So we do have some monies to work with, but we're always looking for more sponsors too. For those of you who need it, the bathrooms are right across the hall as you go out that door then tonight. And so tonight we are talking about local governance matters, civil communication in the current climate. And they'll probably talk a little bit about what the current climate is. We have 4 speakers this evening. We thought maybe we'd have 3, but we have 4. And I'm going, as I say your names, if you'll raise your hand so they know who you are. First, we have Amy Zundell, and she is director of the Rustad Center, but she's also Fargo City Commissioner. Okay, then we have Dennis Cooley right here. Dennis is a professor of philosophy and ethics at NDSU, and he's going to start the evening tonight. Then we have Austin Schauer, who's a legislator from District 13, and then we also have Jim Tunis, who's a legislator. So we're very privileged to have these people here tonight. Please feel free to help yourself to more cookies and water there. So we're going to start with Dennis Cooley again. Thank you. Oh, I forgot. We are looking for more people for Civic West. Saturday morning, we are having an open meeting for Civic West. If anybody is interested in joining us, we're going to be at Diener's Diner, and there's caramel rolls available for anybody who wants to join us. So 10 o'clock Saturday at Diener's Diner. Hope to see some of you there then. Thank you.
I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, especially since we apparently are back into winter. We had that nice thing because North Dakota likes to confuse us and then hit us with what we've got. How do we move this forward? Oops. So I've been asked to do more of a background, a foundation to the particular issues, and we have the folks here who will be taking care of the actual application. And so I'm the director of the Northern Plains Ethics Institute at NDSU, and a whole bunch of other titles, but that just means I can't say no to when people ask me to do extra work. So anyways, but here's the Northern Plains Ethics Institute. I wanted to show you we're built on the democratic principle. And what we do is basically how we think people should be operating within the political realm as well. That's our mission, to promote democratic participation in social and ethical issues affecting the Northern Plains and beyond. And the two big questions we ask are those: what kind of society do we want to live in? How do we get there? And instead of it being a top-down, being told what it is, we want to have civil, thoughtful discussion. Our stakeholders are anybody who has an interest in our community, and they are the ones who answer the questions. So in a democracy, that's how it actually works. We also use, this is the philosopher side of me, philosophers don't have very much truck with name calling and a whole bunch of other things. What we'd like to do is actually get things done. Believe it or not, we're practical people. So we use these different beliefs and principles. Principle of charity, for example, whenever anybody speaks, we assume the person's intelligent, has something important to say. As you know, in a lot of political speech, especially online, people don't do that. They immediately start name calling and so on instead of trying to hear what people are actually saying. Then the obligation is on us to create the best case for what is being said. So not that they have to speak in a way that they could communicate really well, because let's face it, all of us have problems at times being able to convey our message. This should be a conversation, should be back and forth. It should be both of us engaged in trying to figure out what the truth is, or at least get closer to it. Second one, questions of meaning come before questions of truth. I notice a lot of people like to talk past each other, get angry first without actually understanding what the heck is being said. So the obligation is on each of us to actually say, I don't understand what you're saying. Could you explain it to me so that I understand? Now, you don't have to agree with it, but you should at least understand what's being said. And a lot of times, I'm an ethicist as well, and bioethicist. When I have folks talking about abortion, for example, they're actually talking past each other. I think they would agree with each other if they would use the same definitions, at least a little bit, or at least understand each other. By the way, political realm, same thing. And then the final one, that's a hard one. It's called fallibilism. I'm a pragmatist, by the way. Pragmatists don't believe in science. We believe in being wrong. We could be wrong on anything, even our core beliefs. So tonight, you might be showing I am absolutely wrong about a whole bunch of stuff. The idea is we learn from each other. And the only way we can learn from each other is through this humility of understanding we could be wrong. So if I have somebody come in, one of my students come in, and they are geared up, ready to fire off an argument, nope. We're going to start off with, how are you using the terms? How should we understand each other first? And that sort of takes the emotion out, because, of course, we want to make decisions based on reason rather than anything else. So what are the strengths and challenges in civil governance today? Oh, that's really small. This is much more intelligible to me, but it's kind of small here. So I've got, if you want my slide, my PowerPoint, I'm more than happy to do it. But it's just access to information. We've never had an instance in which we have so much information, and actually that might be the problem, sorting the good from the bad. Digital engagement tools. We have all sorts of search tools that you can use to find anything that you want to find. Again, that's really great. It can be really bad. I'm assuming our folks over here will be talking about maybe folks who have done this and they've had the complete wrong idea based on their search engines. And then public discourse on equity. This is not just equality, but let's face it, not everyone is equal in at least one particular way. Whenever I give a talk, and many years ago I was one of the founders of this academy that is actually located at the Sorbonne in Paris. And so all of the people on the executive board were at the University of Montreal, the Sorbonne, University of Paris, Descartes, UCLA, NYU, and me at North Dakota State University. The president, before I got on it, asked me what I had done in order to be exiled to North Dakota. I am not kidding. And I said, NDSU, it offered huge opportunities. And so my research is here, the people are great, but they just assume that that middle part, especially the Northern Plains, there was something really wrong with it. Why do I bring this up? Because when you come in, each of us has disadvantages and advantages we have to recognize. What are their challenges? Political polarization, spread of misinformation, complex bureaucracy. I work at a state, I forgot to do this. What I say here today does not necessarily represent the views of the state of North Dakota State University, or Northern Plains Ethics Institute. I'm actually required to say that. I forgot to do it. Nobody report me to the compliance officer in this year. But we have complex bureaucracies, and so this state is better because you can actually talk to your representatives. You can see that. And sometimes they yell at you if you're waiting to testify outside of the meeting room because you're talking too loud to folks you haven't seen in a while. But a lot of other places are not like that. And then there's declining civic participation. So this group is one of the ones who is fighting that, because part of getting people to be actually part of the democracy, you have to feel that you're part of the we the people. The only way you do that is if you actually engage, instead of being home, isolated on your computers. Now this is how people think of conservatives versus liberals, and I'll just be honest with you, I'm a conservative. Not of the MAGA variety. I don't take political positions. I'm Republican or Democrat, because I'm a state worker. So I don't have a political party. But I do believe in the viewpoints of conservatives and liberals. What happens often is we put these up and people think, oh, there's no overlap between them. We really can't speak to each other. So conservatives, tradition, individual responsibility, loyalty, authority. We value sanctity, binding values, and limited government. The liberals, as they say, equality, social justice, collective action, fairness, and more extensive government. By the way, what we're not saying is there's so many shared values between those two. I guarantee liberals have mostly the same values that conservatives do, and conservatives have the same values liberals do. We just rank them differently, and we understand them differently. A little story, I was at an NEH event, and I was talking about programming for conservative audiences, because I think the NEH should be for everybody, not just for particular groups. And after I was done with my panel, and I admitted to being a conservative, that's why we were there to talk about conservative programming and the humanities. One person walked up to me and said, oh, so what do you think about slavery and about Jim Crow? I couldn't understand, because he assumed because I am for tradition, that somehow I was for tradition of segregation and a whole bunch of other things. I said, conservatives use what works. We want tradition when it works. That was not equality. That was not a conservative viewpoint to enslave people and so on. But that's the viewpoint coming in that you gotta deal with. Key differences in valuing, role of government, of course. Conservatives usually advocate for more limited government. We want to maximize individual liberty and free markets. We believe in private property systems and protection of those. Liberals view the state as essential for ensuring equality, protecting civil rights, and providing social safety nets. I have a feeling every person in the room is okay with all of this. Maybe less stronger, so on. Change in tradition, the scope of compassion, and our core beliefs. Now, I was told that I have 10 minutes, so am I being timed? Anyways, I'll move a little faster, but here's psychological and emotional underpinnings. Why do I bring this up? Because when you're working with people, reason does not often work. Emotions are more powerful. We see people will vote and will think and react based on their emotional values first. And then, if you can appeal to their reasoning, they might change. But if you appeal just to reason, reason doesn't work by itself. You've got to have both of those things together. So when you look at that, you're looking at, these are real studies. Conservatives often perceive the world as a more dangerous place. And that's why there's an emphasis on policing, national defense and border enforcement, empathy. So there's more empathy towards a diverse group under liberals, but all conservatives have empathy. That's where you get the charity. When something goes wrong in Fargo, North Dakota, there's a flood, or West Fargo, people come out and they don't ask you, are you a conservative or a liberal? Are you a Democrat or a Republican? They come out to help because that's how it works here. And then order, because we prefer structure, predictability, and order in our lives. And so that, rather than, and again, if you understand how people think and how they feel, you can do a lot better working with them. So, let me just move here. The role of governance in society. I, by the way, think that this is not a thing for a bill. I really do think we need to have civic engagement education in high schools and hopefully in colleges as well. Because a lot of people don't quite understand how our foundational documents work, and they don't understand what government is supposed to be doing in society. They just don't get it. So governance is supposed to be about stability, the foundation of stability for our society. It should be integrity and accountability. It should respect people's rights. And there are democratic forms that are facing pressures. It's supposed to be facing those so democracy is strengthened. So here's what we would like to see. The key principles for ethical governance, you need integrity, fairness in decision-making, accountability, and respect for the law. All of those are essential. They are not a liberal position. They are not a conservative position. They're a position of people who want to live in a democracy and achieve the opportunities democracies can offer us. Why is transparency essential? Public trust. And this is one of the things I was mentioned to me when I was asked to do this talk, or to at least present this information. One of the things we see is public trust is eroding and relatively quickly. So we're not seeing that as much in North Dakota because, again, there's a huge difference between North Dakota and other areas. You can talk directly to your representatives. You can see who they are. They live in your community. They participate. I see the mayor of West Fargo is here. And a whole bunch of other folks took time out to be here to talk to this group, and they will talk to you as well. I think it's really strange when I talk to my representatives. They will call you on the phone and say, hey, what's going on? Well, I come from New York originally, Western New York. You never see your representatives. There's no connection to that whatsoever because it's a giant state. Public trust is essential to do the tough stuff you need to do. It prevents corruption because if people think, oh, look, I'm accountable because people are focusing on what I'm doing, I'm here. And my public is here, then there's less corruption. Now, North Dakota is not known for its corruption. There are exceptions that I can't talk about, but we're overall relatively honest folks. If you do this as well, transparency encourages civic participation. Democracies die when people don't engage. And then, of course, it enhances efficiency. As a person who talks about this for ethics, engineering, technology, efficiency is a huge thing. You want to be efficient to achieve your goals. You also want to have a good means to ends as well. And then we've got the importance of accessibility. Again, we're an unusual case. Accessibility means you get to talk to the folks who have power. If you're interested in one person, one vote, each person has an equal vote, you need this. You also need to have representatives who are looking at diverse perspectives, not just a particular area, but folks who are considering multiple viewpoints because as one of the big proponents of democracy, John Stuart Mill, said, we have to create marketplaces of ideas. Marketplaces of ideas, no person has the full truth of anything complicated on their own. What we do is we engage in these marketplaces and we draw closer to the truth as we debate with each other, agree with each other, and so on. So we need to have that in order to have effective governance. So here are the strategies. Publishing public data, accessible information. North Dakota is really great about putting all of its information up. And that's something you can read. Any of the bills that are proposed, the markups and everything, you can find relatively easily online. That's not true for a lot of different areas. Independent, so you've got hybrid public meetings. So we do have these opportunities to have in-person meetings. I'm not sure, I haven't testified in a long time in front of any of the legislators. I don't know if they do hybrids. But because the state's so huge, the advantage would do hybrids because some people can't drive to Bismarck. And by the way, if you could improve the sites on the drive to Bismarck, I would really appreciate it. I love the fact we're going 80. I'm finally driving legally. But if you could have some more fun things to look at, that'd be good. Anyways, clear communication. Again, plain language. We don't need highfalutin language. We need to understand what you're doing because remember, who are the ultimate decision makers in the state? It's the voters. The voters are the ultimate ones who make these choices. And then so this would be about how to do the how to be accessible. I can skip past that. But I want to look at this one because this is the big one that you folks are doing now. If you want democracies to not just exist, but to function really well, you need these. Enhanced civic education. I'm a big proponent of this. We need that in order to have people know what they're supposed to do, to know that not only does our country and our society give us rights, it gives us responsibilities. And that we have an obligation, not only to our fellow people, but to future generations to make sure that we leave this place really good for them, in fact, better than we found. University and library partnerships, community collaborations, which happen a great deal of time with my Northern Plains Ethics Institute and NBSU and a bunch of other groups. And then hosting dialogues and events, which you are doing today. So, by the way, I didn't arrange this to work out. It just works out. So these are the ways to address some of the issues that we're facing now. The eroding trust, going into silos and so on. These are ways of strengthening governance, of strengthening democracy, of making people feel that they're going back into the we. And so this is the conclusion. Sorry, I went through this really quickly. But all of us have a commitment to transparency, not just for those who are in the government, but folks who are working with it. They have to know what we need and how we're thinking, why we're thinking that as well, because again, that's information, the best decision. Accessibility and inclusion, all stakeholders matter. Everybody should be treated with respect because their interests matter as well. And then finally, building trust in community. That's where we're working with the values and principles stakeholders actually have, rather than the ones we want them to have. You take the people you have, and you work with them, and both of you can work to become better, but you don't try to force them to fit your holes, or square pegs in round holes, or something about that. I can't remember how it goes, but you can't force them to take your values because they're different. So how can you work together in order to achieve mutual goals? And that's how you build democracy. So that's all I've got. I know that was really fast, but I need to get out of the way so the actual interesting people can come on up and talk. That's it.
Okay, who wants to do that?
He's like Ronald Reagan. It's tough to follow him. He's a great orator.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you all for being here tonight, taking time out of your schedule. Appreciate that. Appreciate Civic West. Appreciate our Democrat friends for being here tonight. And so many years ago, I played church league basketball. And it was a very intense game in church league basketball. Thank you. And we kind of got at each other. And our team won and the other team lost. And a guy by the name of Ivor Berge, his brother Don Berge, taught many years in West Fargo Public Schools. And Ivor was extremely intense, at 6'3", threw a few elbows. And all of a sudden, at a house in South Fargo, I hear a knock at the door. So I go to the door, and there stands Ivor Berge. I said, "What's up, Ivor?" And he said, "Can I come in?" And I said, "I don't know. What are you going to do?" And I come on in, and he said, "Austin," he said, "I want to apologize for what happened. I was completely out of control, and I'm sorry." And I said, "Ivor, you were out of control, and I do accept your apology. But I have something to tell you, Ivor. I was just out of control as well." So I'm up here before you today talking about civility, and I feel a little bit like a hypocrite because there's been times in my life when I've been uncivil. And I also feel bad for you in this presentation because he's an expert on civility. And can you imagine him at home in an argument with his wife? And then his wife looks at him and says, "And you're an expert in civility? Go to your room." That would be very difficult. I just have a couple of prepared comments, and then I'll sit down. When we talk about civility in the public sector, we are really talking about the health of our republic. Democracy has never required us to agree. In fact, disagreement is part of its design. But democracy does require something deeper, and that is respect. It requires us to see the person across the aisle not as our enemy, but as a fellow citizen, entrusted with the same responsibility we are. Civility is not weakness. It is not the absence of conviction. It does not mean we water down our principles or avoid difficult debates. Some of the most important issues we face demand strong, clear positions. But civility does mean we argue policy without attacking character. We challenge ideas without demeaning people. We listen with the intention of understanding, not just responding. In public service, tone matters. Words matter. The way we conduct ourselves shapes public trust, not only out in front in the chamber, but behind in closed-door rooms. When citizens see constant hostility, they lose confidence not just in one party or the other, but in the entire system. And yet, I've seen something different inside the legislature. I've seen members who disagree sharply on policy work together on other areas of shared concern. I've seen conversations that begin in tension but end in mutual respect. That kind of work doesn't make the headlines, but it does make progress. Civility is not about comfort. It's about discipline. It's choosing to treat others with dignity even though emotions are running high. It's remembering that long after the debate ends, we still have to govern together. If we want a more civil political culture, it starts with us, those who serve, and those who elect us. It starts in our homes, in our schools, in our community, in our churches. It starts when we refuse to reward outrage and instead value thoughtful engagement. The strength of our state and our nation and West Fargo has never come from uniformity of opinion. It has come from people willing to debate fiercely and still shake hands afterwards. I have one more story to tell, if my time isn't up yet. So I'm in your fair city, West Fargo. 55 plus community on 13th Avenue. You know where that's at? Yep. Nice. Little old ladies, they invite me in for cookies. We talk, they sign. And I knocked on this one door, and there was a flag and a veteran. I thought, this is nice. I'm on Veterans Committee. I love veterans. I raise money for veterans. And he gets out, and we start talking, and he's mad. And he's angry. And he's bitter. And the VA system has screwed him. And the fraud in Minnesota and North Dakota is awful. And government is terrible. And so here I'm thinking, calm down. Be civil, that's what we're talking about tonight. But it gets worse and worse and worse. And as Bernie Dardis knows, you can only take so much. And so I went nose to nose with him. Not long, just like, kind of like the old days. He turned around, he walked away. I turned around, I then knocked on the other doors of the little old ladies, and I got my signatures. So I had my full page of signatures, and then I walked him back to my car. And this man comes out of his house. Apartment. And I looked at him and said, I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight. And he goes, no, I just want to say something. And we had a nice conversation, and we shook hands, and he went his way, and I went my way. And as he's walking back to his little house apartment, he turns to me and goes, what did you want me to do again? And I said, I wanted you to sign my petition to get my name on the primary ballot. He goes, bring it over, I'll sign. So even though civility and uncivil behavior sometimes is not good, it can also produce good results. So thank you for having me.
Should have known not to follow the public media news broadcaster as well. I should have decided to go first. I didn't write anything formal. I know a lot of times when I come to this, it's a lot of just mutual open discussion, which I so much appreciate. So some of the things that stuck out to me after the presentation when they were talking was the concept of building public trust, which I think is one of the more difficult things to do as an elected official. And the more I think about it, the more things that stick out to me on why that's hard is because realistically speaking, the average person doesn't come to a city commission meeting because they think that you're doing everything right. I would say the overwhelming majority of people that engage with government do so because they don't think that it's right. They're upset about something, they feel passionate about it, and they take time out of their very busy schedule with the 12,001 activities and the snow and the ice on the roads to come to a meeting at 5:30 p.m. to voice their opinion. And so the system is, in so few words, built on this, right? Like, you're not doing something how I think you should be doing it. My first starting with government in general was actually with Mr. Shower. Something happened in my personal life to my son. I didn't like how it was handled. I thought there were gaps in the criminal justice system, and we worked together to try and come up with a solution. And something as basic as, I think how Mr. Shower and I looked at it, it's basic as child welfare seems like something that universally everybody can agree on. But even when you agree, you still maybe disagree on how you're going to handle it or how you're going to achieve the solution. So what I have learned as a city commissioner, and I get a unique perspective because I work inside government as well, is we're kind of like the subscription people can't unsubscribe from, no matter how much they want to. To some degree, when you're a city commissioner, you have 40,000 bosses in the city of West Fargo, and they all think that maybe you should handle things one way or another, and that could vary in different ways, and there's lots of little overlapping Venn diagrams. And oftentimes, my goal is how can we do the most right for the most people? There is no perfect answer. I stand firmly in the fact that I don't think there's a decision that we make as a city commission that's going to feel universally wonderful and 100% accepted. And that's the reality, and it's hard as a public official. And I think maybe one of the reasons people don't want to run is because no matter what decision you make, there is a fraction of people who think you made the wrong one. And that's challenging sometimes. And it's challenging to not throw your hands up in the air and feel like, I don't know what you want me to do. And even on the side of showing up with employees in the park district, I really feel like my staff could mow a piece of lawn somewhere, and I could have 6 different complaints about how it was done. Someone could say it was too short, someone could say it wasn't short enough, someone could say the person on the lawnmower is making too much money, someone's mad about the time of day that they did it, someone thinks you shouldn't even have grass there and you should have a pollinator garden and you should be doing something else, and someone else just thinks the park district shouldn't even get any mills or tax dollars, and somebody else should be worried about how the lawn's going to get mowed. And it becomes increasingly difficult, I think, sometimes for public employees to also sit in the center of how some of this discord goes. I can speak for everybody I've met from an employee within the city of West Fargo. They genuinely are showing up because they care about the city. They're showing up trying to do the right thing the best they can. And I haven't met one of them that's like, man, I just want to stick it to the taxpayers and mail in. They genuinely, sincerely care about everybody. Snow removal is kind of like lawn removal. There are people who are upset that the snow removal isn't fast enough. There are people who are upset that there is sand on the road. There's people who are upset when sand isn't on the road. There's people that are upset when you salt the roads and when you don't salt the roads. And then there are people that are upset that when you plow the roads, they have snow at the end of their driveway and we don't have gates. And so I go back to this concept of it's hard to maintain civility sometimes because people feel really passionate about these really basic core issues that affect your day to day. And how do you find a perfect resolution that everybody's like, we came together on this as a Venn diagram and we feel good about it. And ultimately, I think every time we do an ordinance, we do a resolution, every time we pass a budget, realistically speaking, there is a winner and a loser. You know, I can think of some really passionate things that we've dealt with in my time on the city commission. The most recent one I can think of would be like the Hope Lutheran Church zoning. And we had a neighborhood and a church and different communities of people who all seemingly wanted to come together on something and they thought they were right. Nobody walks away from that, I don't think, a winner, but at some juncture, you have to pick what you're doing and you vote, and 5 people vote, and the chips fall where they fall, and that's the decision that gets made, and ultimately, that decision impacts that group of people really, really substantially. But at the end of the day, I think some people felt like they won and some people felt like they lost. And ultimately, I don't think there is any way around that. I don't know that that's ever warm and fuzzy for the people that feel like they lost. So overall, I think it's been it's been a very good learning experience. There are so many complex decisions. I can say that I think even if I did this for 8 years, I'd probably still be learning things about city operations. I learn something new every day. I learn something new with every opinion. So my goal is always to just engage respectfully with people. My goal is to always just want to have enough information that you can have to make the right decision. But ultimately, I think it does really come down to sometimes you just have to make the best decision you can with the information you have at the time for the most amount of people. So I'm always happy when people show up to be civically engaged, regardless of what they want to be civically engaged about. And if they want to tell me I'm dumb and awful and we make terrible decisions, like, I'm so happy at least that they showed up because they're paying attention to what's going on. And I think that kind of is what counts. So my speech is not as polished or as riveting as Mr. Showers, but I think some of the local government perspective that I've taken so far on that. You're up, Mr. Jonas. Bring it home.
Good job. What's that? Pardon? Oh, I don't need a mic.
Just to get the audience. Talk about encouraging people to attend and to run for office. Oh, yeah, you gotta listen.
District 13 here, House of Representatives, but also on the school board. So I'm serving on the West Fargo School Board, and I'll talk a little bit more on the school side of it a little bit here. One of the worst things on civility was COVID. COVID, when that hit us, we didn't know what was going on. We had anti-vaxxers, vaxxers. The civility was just blown away. And I was president of the school board there, and at that time, and we as a school board decided to go mask optional. We made the decision at 1 o'clock on a Monday. 3 o'clock, CDC came out and said, we want masks required nationwide. And so we just got inundated, and man, there's nothing worse than angry parents. The civility was lost there for a while. We tried to bring calm, and then the science, and we were hit with that, and so that was real tough. And then the situation with the soccer team at Cheyenne, if you remember that, some of the kids had been exposed, and the state tournament came about, and the athletes weren't allowed to compete because the High School Activity Association had put in some rules on competition. So nothing worse than 20 angry soccer moms at a school board meeting. So that was by far my toughest stint in dealing with that. But a wise man by the name of Pat Simmers my old football coach, when I was deciding to run for the school board 8 years ago, I think it would be now, we met at Spitfire. He goes, one thing I want you to know, listen to learn to lead. Listen to learn to lead. And I've always used that. Bernie, when I first, Bernie and I were talking about my decision to run and so forth. So I think when you go into a meeting or some situation with that, all the meetings, I try to contribute and listen what the constituents want. And sometimes I'm not right. Sometimes. But you try to adhere to that, and compromise is another aspect of it. In the legislature, now I'll put on my legislative hat, we have quite a few committee meetings. Like, everything's transparent. All our meetings are on being filmed. All the bills are for people to look at. And we try to compromise as much as we can. And I know Austin mentioned there was one instance where I wasn't very good. I wasn't a very good person. I was on education. I'm on the education committee, being a former teacher and coach. My classroom's right across the street. Every time I drive by and I look and I see it, my old classroom, I was in there for 30 years. With an education bill where they wanted to allow somebody with a high school degree to start teaching. In rural North Dakota, it's real tough to get teachers. And this was a small town, and it was right outside the governor's office. And the two proponents, the two people that proposed the bill, said, Jonas, this is what we want to do. These small rural areas, we need kids right now. By the way, the guy was 19 years old. He just graduated a year or two ago before, and they wanted him to come back and teach. I think it was social studies. And being a social studies guy, I said, and a guy with a formal education, I said, no, we need some requirements and so forth. So it got pretty heated outside. Governor's office at the time was Governor Burgum. Secretaries came and closed the door, and Secretary of State came out, Michael Hall, and said, guys, so we went down and Bill we killed the bill, and about 5 minutes later, I went and apologized to both legislators. We were wrong, and I said I was wrong, and so that was my worst moment in the legislature, and so civility was lost there, and we see it every day. You hear about the cell phone bill in the schools? That was my bill, 1160. The day I introduced it in January and worked with the governor on it, and got a phone call from a parent, angry parent, First Amendment right. You're taking my daughter's right away for communication. I want to communicate her while she's in school. I'm worried about her. And I said, well, no. I said the National School Safety and Security Alliance says in times of emergencies, the cell phone is bad because an intruder can hear the text message of people talking. And he said, well, I'm coming up to the Capitol. I'm going to kick your butt. And I said, well, I tried to calm him down. He starts yelling at me. And I said, well, let me know. I'll meet you outside the Capitol. And he said, well, and he starts screaming. I said, sure, you have anger issues. So he goes, well, I'm going to file an ethics complaint against you for telling me I had anger issues. So never did show up. I was waiting for him, but it wasn't very coy there. But anyways, we try to do the best we can, make policies, and also in our schools, try to do the best we can in a growing school district. So with that, are we going to take questions? And I know you were looking for donations. Tom Seymour is back there. He thinks I don't listen to him. I heard you.
Anybody have questions in the audience now? Okay, go ahead.
So thank you for the question. Thank you for all the really valuable to give you guys perspective of what's happened on the ground and how you deal with that. This is for any of listen to within the party, within another party, just within the faith group? How do you feel? Are things getting worse? Are we neutral? Or how do you feel about it?
Well, our Republican Party is split. I've been called a rhino of the week, you as rhino of the week, rhinos, yeah. To them, I say Republican noise only. We try to be civil, and everybody has a right to their belief, and we try to work with them. And if you're ever in Bismarck and you're in a chamber, you'll see that it's divided. The Democrats are on one side, the moderates, which are the vast majority of us, are in the rest, and on the far left side are ultra conservatives, let's call them. And I'm a Ronald Reagan Republican, our 80-20 follow platform, and if you disagree, him and Chip O'Neill used to go and have beer afterwards, or brandy, I think was their favorite drink, I think. But we try to work with them for the betterment of North Dakota, and you take the slings and arrows. When you enter the public service, you better have thick skin. And I have the advantage of being a basketball coach and a football coach. Everybody can do it better than me.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think it's easy for all of us to get caught into what's happening in Washington, D.C. and the politics there. It's basically want to be in their at each other's throats. People love Trump or they hate Trump. People love the Democratic Party or they hate them. I mean, it's very, very, in Bismarck, it's so much fun. And it's hard to explain without being there. But this last session, we on the House voted on over 900 bills. 900 bills. So you're in your two committees, and you work on the bills in those committees, and then the other bills that you're not aware of, you have to really rely on those committees. And so because you're working on so many bills, there might be one bill where Jim and I are on the same side. Jim's my best friend. The next bill, Jim is not on my side. Jim is not my best friend anymore. But I still got to be respectful of Jim because the third bill, he might be on my side. So it's kind of like growing up in a big house with a lot of kids. You know, one day you're at each other's throat, and the next day you might meet somebody. My pastor's wife could talk about this. So if you have the right attitude and the right motive on wanting to be there, not carrying this agenda of trying to change the world as opposed to just changing your community or whatever that community looks like, if you have the right motivation, the right heart, it's all going to work out in the end. But let me tell you something. I have more issues with some of the Republicans on my side than the Democrats on the other side over my 7 years. It's just the way it is. And, you know, we talked a little bit about stability. If you put people first, really, your intention and motive is to advance North Dakota, advance people in your community. If that comes over power and ego, then it's going to work out. It's going to work out. But when power and ego starts getting in the way, that's when you get bullies. And I bet you every single person in this room hates bullies. And no one's supposed to dislikes bullies. And so that's where the passions can really flare up, and then you don't feel as civil as you should.
I appreciate this.
I really heard a contrast of structure and process for engagement and how the public can be engaged. And Dennis, you talked a lot about that accessibility and that ability to have conversations. But those typically can only be one-to-one because the structure is not there for other kinds of more inclusive conversations at different points in a process. I see a clash that structure enables only very structured process at particular points. Maybe it's the hearing process, but there's already a bill. Where was the process for people to be engaged in? These are bills we'd like you to advance. One-to-one, I might be able to talk to a legislator who could put together a bill to advance it. But there is no way for us as a community or groups of people to really brainstorm and say, well, what could we do better? How could we handle this problem? You know, we're not engaged in a process at different points in which we really can have some input. And I think that's part of the problem, Amy, with that clash. Because the clash comes when things are already structured and already being done. And it would take a massive change that you just can't engage in. And so you have found a good way to do it. You know, what's the best outcome from the most score? But is there a way to back that up a bit and say, maybe if we involve people in some different ways along the way, we'd have some different reactions because you feel like you really were listened to. There really was a way to have input that was a collective good input, not just me off the top of my head talking to a legislator or a commissioner. That's just random thoughts. But does anybody have any thought about how we might look at structures as ways that are kind of precluding civic engagement as a process?
I think the town hall are really important when people have those things. They need to talk to a lot of different people at the same time. I've worked with legislators for, I don't know, 24 years in the state. So I've been working with them, and it's amazing what can be done. The first time I testified at the State House, one of the senators from the western part of the state asked me if I could talk about smoking cars with children and talk about the ethics of that. Because I do bioethics. And I said, yeah, because there's the class of the school district he represented, that was their bill. They put together that bill as a bunch of kids. By the way, we tried that twice and they got knocked out both times. But that sort of thing is, so those bills, and this state is incredibly receptive to bills, in fact, maybe too receptive because there are way too many coming in. But you can put together, this group could put together a bill or write it up and then find a representative who is interested in it could be introduced. You don't see that in many other states. So there actually is a structured place where you can have a huge amount of impact. And I know, as I said, with the different legislators, I talk to city commissioners and so on. I ask them to do stuff. They come to all sorts of events. It's amazing, and they don't charge me anything. They won't fix my parking. That bothers me. But so I think there is a structure that just needs to be taken advantage of.
Yeah, I had a bill I introduced a constituent who was on student teacher, trying to get funds for student teachers. Many states give a student teacher stipend because most states don't want their student teachers to work now. There was a constituent that reached out to me, and that killed incorporation. And I know there's another group, another one lady's already reached out to me on a bill to introduce on funding for school counselors. More stipends for them. It's very expensive to get their masters and so forth. So I'll introduce that this next session. And so there's a lot of bills. I'd say often you might see almost 100 bills where a constituent might have introduced it.
I would say the structure really better would be involvement. And I guess the example would be the Eastland bill. And it took at least 3 different sessions for the Eastland bill to be passed. And that passed $25. And that was a very, very difficult bill to get through. But the people behind that were extremely organized. And they were on top of everything. And they probably had 40, 50, 60 different people. And when you have that kind of wave of interest coming in on the bill, you listen up. There's no question about that. And I've had other situations where I've taken a bill forward, and then the people that were interested, they bailed on me on the Senate side. Great on the House side, great in the House chamber, and then I said, I need your help. I need your help on the Senate side. They didn't show up. And then it got long. I can get a release up there. So really, bringing the bill forward, you know, the bill that she brought was, she did the research for free. You have to be ready to take it and take the arrows and make sure you're on top of your game and make sure that everything's covered. Because right away, the first thing you think about when you take a bill is like, what's my opposition? What are they going to say? And how are they going to back it? There's a lot of different reasons people do not like bills, and they'll invent things to them. So the structure comes from involvement.
I think there are a lot of existing things that exist that probably happen behind the scenes. So, for example, I serve on an Alliance for Children's Justice. It's probably one of my favorite multidisciplinary boards I've ever been on because it takes people that are involved in child welfare from every single angle. People that work in the juvenile court, school counselors, legislators, people that run nonprofits, people that work with, the Rape and Abuse Crisis Center, the YWCA, anybody who touches the area of child welfare. And there's also authentic voices of people who have been victims of child abuse, neglect, maltreatment throughout their life, and people that have kind of a stake in it. And they get together and they do an educational presentation. A lot of times we do like a case that occurred in the state, and the state's attorney will review kind of how the state went, positively, negatively, what could have been done differently. But they also work to discuss what type of legislative priorities they can bring up. I think the best thing about it is you flush out some of this kind of, oh, hey, I think this is a really great idea for me, myself, and I, and my group only, because it's very easy to not see what some of the implications are when you do something like that. When you get a bunch of people who, again, you got people who use criminal, that's what I'm looking for, whether they're in jail, criminal justice reform. There are people that are on two different sides of that issue, and they're like really passionate on both sides of those. When you can sit those people together in a room, along with social workers and counselors and people who take care of victims and police officers and legislators, and you can have an authentic discussion about what could potentially fix a problem, you flush a lot of stuff out because you realize, like, hey, I may think this is a fantastic idea, and then you bring it in the room and they're like, whoa, this is going to have negative effects here and negative effects here and negative effects here. And I think the more you can have groups like that kind of flush some of this out so that they're not having to sift through 1,000 bills and flush it out with testimony in a fast-paced environment, the better. Because I think the ultimate reality for a lot of this stuff, some of the best bills, they're not invented in session. I mean, this stuff, it's like sessions over, okay, what are we moving on to next? What are our legislative priorities going to be kind of the next time around? But I do think to be effective, a lot of it is grassroots. It's people coming together because at the end of the day, every single legislator, they're human beings, they've got jobs that they leave for 3 months, they have families that they leave for 3 months, there's competing priorities from a bunch of different places, on the city level, you've got full-time jobs, school board level, a lot of times people have full-time jobs, and so it's great to be curious, but I think it's impossible to be curious to the level that you would be able to do where you're touching all these areas that you know nothing about. So I think a lot of it's the passion to be at a grassroots level with the mindset of who are the people that aren't going to like this bill or this concept, or what's the disagreement going to be, and how can we find consensus at an early stage before we bring it forward. Is that some of the best ways to approach it? Because I think you all represent. I met Austin because I literally was like, hey, I don't like this, you're my legislator, and then we didn't go together, and then we didn't know him, and you didn't know me from Adam, and we worked together.
You seem like a nice person.
Yeah, I had a sad story, so it's probably hard to say no to, but I think it happens in between sessions. It's relationship building, it's ultimately trying to understand what the barriers are, because a lot of it sounds really good and simple on paper, much more difficult in structure when you're talking about how you're going to take it to finality.
So, sort of a silly question, but also serious. If you have a crystal ball, we've got tournaments coming up, and we've got the accessibility and adversarial. How do you think, in your crystal ball, what's the outlook in that balance of how does that look with those two fundamental changes for you guys? Why?
The annual session bill did come up last session, Glenn and Bill, unfortunately, did a lot of work on it, and I voted for it, and then it failed on the Senate side. I think we're to that point, we should have annual sessions, and they wanted to keep it within that 80 days, so one might be 40 to 50 days, one might be 30 days, because, like this year we had a special session. I mean, things are changing so rapidly in so many areas of culture, so I think that will eventually come. What was the other areas as far as the personality? Oh, the term limits? Well, I was against the term limits just because of principle. I think people should decide who's in and who's not just the regulations. But I understand the positive side of it. Sometimes you have people that are there too long, and they get to be a little bit heavy on the power side. If I say that. But I think you're going to have fewer people that will experience, but it doesn't matter. If you have good people there who are going to work hard and really devote themselves to good public policy, it's going to work out fine. There's no perfect legislation. It's going to work out fine. If you have people there that bring in this agenda, and I'm going to do this or that, and then it's not going to work out because they're not going to be open to discussion and then be able to work on bills together to make it the best possible bill it can be, where the most amount of people can agree on. That's just what it is. And compromise doesn't mean that you're a moderate or you're this or that, you're whatever label. It means you're working on good public policy. So, passionate.
And we do think that the annual session will come shortly here. One thing we're seeing too is that with the term limits, legislative council had to hire 15 more people, 15 more lawyers and so forth. So what you're going to see is more of a bureaucracy being developed. And there's going to be that knowledge base. And with the term limits, it gives young guys, I can't say young guys, I'm up for re-election there, it gives you a chance to move up in terms of maybe chairing a committee. Like I became vice chair of political subdivision in my second session. And then I got put on the rules committee. The rules committee is really difficult because there's like 800 rules you have to be on, and you have to be almost like a parliamentarian. So you can see where that experience matters, and the institutional knowledge is one thing that will be lost with that. By far, most of the legislators out there for a good reason. Try to make the state better.
Can I add something to that? So, I testified on some changes to the ethics rules before the ethics commission. And the chair of the committee had said to him, what's going to happen is this, if you don't take care of this yourself, these minor changes to the rules. In the real world, everybody loves their representatives. They're wonderful, they're honest, and so on, but everyone else is a dirty, crooked splay. And what's going to happen is they're going to take care of it for you, and it's going to pass with a large majority of that. And this is exactly what happened. The term limits are the same thing. The trust is eroded. And so that trust is, you may trust your own person, but you don't trust all those other people because they keep doing things. And remember, this is going to be vulnerable. I always tell my students and everyone else, positives, 100 positive things, they're completely eroded with one negative thing. So this is my little example. If you have a beautiful pool, how many turds have to be in it before you don't swim?
There are actual rules and regulations. I've since learned the depth of it is quite complex.
And on that note,
I think some of it too, though, one of the harder parts about being in public office, it's the same thing we'll look at law enforcement. Every single thing they do is recorded on a camera. And then they make the decisions that they make in real time because there's circumstances that you probably can't even capture on camera. And then it's played for the world to see. Anytime you're in a legislative anything, you can have, I mean, the running joke once I got elected that my husband and I partake in is, what am I going to be quoted saying in the paper after a meeting? And I will tell you, the stuff that gets picked out of a whole intelligent discussion with context, with whatever, what gets printed, I'm like, respectfully to the people who write that, I'm like, I'm not sure why this was the comment. And it's a snippet, and that's the other part that's hard about governance is we have sometimes, Bernie's probably like, I wish these people would shut up here. We have long, lengthy discussions about things because you do it in the public light because you're asking for transparency. But what happens when people only rely on a newspaper article or a 30-second down news live skit is they take 2 sentences out of your entire discussion, and that's what they use, and then that's what everybody clickbait judgments on how it went, and then the comment section starts rolling, and then inevitably Trump gets brought into it, and Epstein, and whatever in the files when you're talking about local trash, sanitation policies, or whatever. So, I think to some degree, some of the things that people that aren't in office, I just really wish everybody would again realize, like, we're people, and when you're having discussions, you're going to say things that don't come out perfectly. I have a spouse, I think probably a lot of you do too. Sometimes when you're in the meeting, like, you say things that come out not correctly, and unfortunately, I think when you're in the public life, you don't get that grace, you don't get the opportunity to be like, that came out. Because once it's printed, it's etched in your memoir for, what, forever? You still chasing some of the things from maybe some of your first terms and you got quoted or whatever. So I think it's difficult, like, with this eroding trust because inevitably you could be one of the most honest people in the world and you don't get to paint your own story for how people interpret what you say. You don't get to, not everybody's listening to everything that you're saying. You're judged by what someone else somewhere who's trying to sell newspapers or ad time on TV wants to pick out what you said.
But I will add to that, I think you remind me, you come to the point you care, but you don't care. You care, but you don't care.
You can't care if you want to.
Exactly, because it will drive you crazy. And the one person you have to answer to is the person that you're looking in the mirror. And if you maintain as great integrity, you keep your heart as pure as possible, your relationship with God has got to be there as well. Then you can live it. And you're not going to please everybody, and that's just the way it is. And you just
Don't look at social media.
that's right.
Yeah, the comment sections.
And for the record,
That's a whole
I have
different
never
thing.
wished the commissioners on Dal shut up.
So
I have never
nice of
ever had
you.
that thought. Not once.
Well, thanks.
Okay, other questions? Seth?
You see some of that. I'd say more on the cultural issues, the bookends, transgender issues. I'd say awesome.
There's always federal funds that go into infrastructure, roads, schools. So we get a little bit of that, and there's a lot of matching funds that the Fed will go 90%. But I think it depends on the legislator. Lots of the legislators are big into the social issues and the Ten Commandments and that type of thing. So in my mind, you debate them, you take the vote, and you walk away. I will say this, it seems like, after I've been here for a while, it seems like a lot of the bills that we pass really have no impact. And someone mentioned 80 miles an hour, that's probably the biggest impact. And the $1,600 in the tax credit, biggest impact. We passed really great legislation health and human services and veterans, etc. But they just kind of, unless you're impacted by it, you don't really see it. So, to a certain degree, but I think probably more than that. Not really too much. I'm not in the energy team. Usually when it comes to violence, it's all energy related, some agriculture, but I don't think it really impacts that much as far as actual policy.
Mostly finance and things like energy, like coal gasification, whatever, CO2 storage. Nothing with the
That's more the federal government on regulations and so forth.
I will say, if you watched the special session this past, about a month ago or so, it's $200 million, $199 million coming for the rural health care transfer. So that was a big deal, and how to spend that money between now and October 1st. We have another $200 million coming. And I found it interesting that DOGE does, all the money, this and that, and then all of a sudden there's $50 billion for 50 states, and North Dakota comes up with $400 million, and then we got to spend it and find out how to spend it. I'm thinking, is this mega or is this not mega? It's just the craziest deal. And so, anyway, that might be some examples of cuts or increases in finances from the federal government.
Okay, well, I thank you all for your participation and your questions, and I'd like you to show your appreciation to these people. Thank you for being here, we really appreciate it. I have two announcements. The next chat is going to be March 19th, right here, and we're going to talk about hunger in West Fargo. And if you don't think that there is hunger in West Fargo, come and find out. And then I want to invite you again for Saturday morning at 10 o'clock at the Diener's Diner. We're looking for more people